I think we're live. We are live.
Where's everybody? Where is everyone?
We're a small cast today.
For Green Talk?
Yeah,
is that why we're here?
I feel like Dick Cavett. I don't have any place to put my water.
My drinks.
For those who know who Dick Cavett is.
That is old school.
We
just lost our only viewer. He says Dick Cavett. That's trouble.
That is trouble. Hey, so welcome to our third edition of Green Talk, presented by Infinite Green. I am Scott McIntyre, the chief instigator and co-founder of Infinite Green, along with my co-founder, troublemaker, co-host, John Bloom.
And Monkey.
So we have a different, for those of you who have watched this before, we have a different setting that we're testing out. This is the corner of our office. The last couple have been in our conference room, and this is, we're trying a new setting. Maybe less people. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or no one wanted to join us today.
It's a little more comfortable. I can't get Scott into the conference room. He likes the couch. So
I do like the couch. Anyway.
Hey, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I was going to say Brian Dozier is here as well, but you can't see him because he's kind of protecting the light coming through our window, so we don't look whiter than we are. But we're pretty white Minnesotans up here in the North Country. Anyway, so the topic of the day is knowledge management. Knowledge management is something that I think is one of the harder technology concepts in contact center services. It needs to be something that's it's maintained, that there's a lot of good processes built around. Not that other technology isn't, but I think knowledge management is pretty elusive because it has such a broad connotation across an enterprise. It means web content for an e-commerce team. It means maybe file content for store teams or other operational type teams. But for the contact center, it means finding answers and pretty quickly. A customer calls in with something either very common or something that's not so common, having the ability for an agent to get to the right level of content as fast as possible and as relevant as possible for the consumer, I think is the goal of a good knowledge management platform.
So you're talking about Google, right? Google's knowledge
could be management? Google doesn't have its own knowledge. Google is a search engine that sits on top of a set of knowledge, and their set of knowledge is just everything on the internet. So that's at the broadest possible definition, I suppose. Google and all of the things it searches, the knowledge of the internet is what it searches for, but it's not necessarily a knowledge management tool. It's more of a search engine tool.
Yeah, so it's probably a misnomer, right? Or at least it clouds up the discussion a little bit about, do I have a knowledge base? Do I have knowledge management? What really is knowledge management is not necessarily the tool,
right,
or the search, right? It's the whole ecosystem around how information that's pertinent to your business, your product set, software, whatever that is, and how that helps from a support standpoint, or could be social, could be things that there's interaction, opportunity to rate and review and those kind of things. So I think it's a really good topic. I think it's a misunderstood or misrepresented topic. And we've got a couple of pretty good experiences in deploying it, leveraging knowledge management, kind of all the above, customizing it, but
specifically for contact center type environments where you're using it to serve customers. You're using it to tee up information that an agent that's not so contextually educated on all the different various things about your business that you've learned over the years. Yeah. You're trying to have employees come in. Maybe that's a great place to start. I mean, I think the purpose of it is to supplement, somebody that's been at the company for 20 years at your company or a company for 20 years has all this is ingrained knowledge about how things have operated.
Yeah.
And how to service products and answer questions about all your different company processes. Well, if you have somebody that's new, that's hired to come in and do that, you want them to talk to customers. That's a really tough road, a tough mountain to climb, to be able to take all those 20 years and boil it down into a week of training. So a good knowledge management platform would be a good bridge in between the 20 years of knowledge as an example, and how do you want to boil that down so that somebody that's just coming into the organization can serve a customer with the same kind of relevant information and content that you would a 20-year vet. And I think that's really what a good knowledge management platform can do for a company. So let's talk a little bit about what are the knowledge platforms on the market today, specifically as it relates to contact centers. What have we seen in the market? I know we've used SharePoint is probably a good and the more common way that businesses collect and try to share information. I think SharePoint,
kind of like document management, right? And document sharing versus true knowledge management in a sense, but it is a good way for companies generally to get started.
Would you say that most companies think SharePoint is knowledge management?
I would think so. I think a lot of people think that's as far as they need to go. And generally then what happens is you build your process around the functionality of SharePoint. And if you have a good developer, you might be able to get some, additional search processes built out or those kind of things. But for the most part, you're going to get out of the box functionality, maybe some forms, good distribution model. So I think it can work in most cases, but there are some limits to it. And there are some things that if you're trying to go through a high volume contact center type of a shop, it's probably good more from a reference perspective than it is in a true, I need to search indexed words, natural language search, some of those things. I think that's where the more focused knowledge management tools are much more suited to, to giving you more bang for the buck.
Yeah, I think, when you think about SharePoint, you think about document storage and you think about that's the place I want to have all my training content, my forms, my procedures. And, I've seen environments where it's taken, up to 15 minutes to find information that's relevant to what the customer might ask. No, it's not. 15 minutes is a long time on the phone, especially for a customer. I think they have the patience for maybe 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, SharePoint's great from a document storage versus, and that's another good topic too, is document storage versus true KM.
Yep.
But I think true KM tools like Akana, or if you even think about Google sitting on top of a set of knowledge instruments or data artifacts, is how fast can I find my answer? With Google, you can find it pretty quick. I mean, that's why everybody around the world uses Google, right? I can get relevant information in a quick search. And we've seen a lot of companies, we've heard about a lot of companies using and indexing and buying Google search engine for their knowledge tools. So how do you take an existing set of knowledge, tag it, and make it relevant to a Google application, and literally use Google to search your internal, your internal network of documents and files? And it's a bit of a project, but we've seen people do that as well.
What I like about that is that, and we've seen this in some of the projects that we've done in the past, and some things we're working on right now. But people, especially some of the younger generation that's coming up into the workforce now, they grew up with Google, right? So being able to search on something in your own words or in the customer's words versus how did I physically structure that piece of information or that article in our knowledge base, so that I have to know the buzzwords about the article, I have to know the title of that article or the reference number for that article. Now you take kind of all of that guesswork or all that heavy process or heavy understanding of the system, and you take that out of the equation and you say, okay, how do I do this? Might be the way you search for it, much more in a natural context or contextual search. And it seems to be, to me, that makes more sense if you want to reduce the amount of time it takes for an agent to get up to proficiency. If you can make sure that they have the right resources available when they do that search to make the right decision, right? So it's kind of like you have to know the purpose of the call or the purpose of the contact and be able to search naturally in your own words based on what the customer tells you to get that result, versus, hey, I'm going to spend a couple of weeks teaching you all the nits and gnats of the program, but also another week on how to search the database because this is the way that it limits us from being a good contextual
Right.
search engine. And I think that's why people, I'm sure, are going to Google as, well, why don't we just use their engine and their technology to layer that on. The misconception probably is you still have to structure the indexing and some of the data and the way that the search pulls back information to your articles anyway, right? So there's still that translation layer that has to occur.
And you still have to have a process to update it. So, one of the bigger pitfalls I think that we've seen. We also had a
No spillage.
hard down there.
No spillage.
One of the biggest, I think, issues or challenges we've seen in organizations is, great, you launch a product or a tool, you call it knowledge management, you hire a bunch of people to put all the content in there.
Yeah.
And then it's, it doesn't get updated, it doesn't get managed. There isn't a process for, re-indexing the information in a way that's relevant to
Reviewing and validating.
and updating it. So the knowledge process, I think, is the process that surrounds it is probably more important than the tool itself.
Yeah.
Keeping it fresh, keeping it active, keeping it relevant, and that investment. A lot of companies plug it in and say, "Well, it's plug and play." Right? Here we go. Here's the tool. Go use it. And they forget to invest in people and processes that. It's an ecosystem. I mean, Google, I'm sure Google has thousands of people probably re-indexing and indexing and creating algorithms for making information more relevant all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And if companies don't do that, you get stuck. You get stuck with old data, data or information that's not relevant. They stop using it. They start creating their own indexes and their own types of content.
Yeah.
As a survival mechanism. And I think that's probably the biggest, no matter what knowledge tool you have in your environment, what you leverage, having people to maintain it and have a team that maintains it and being able to measure its effects is probably one of the bigger gaps that I've seen.
Plus, so let me ask you this. It doesn't seem like on the surface that it's very easy to start if you don't have if you know you need knowledge management or a more formal knowledge process, starting in a big organization, because it typically has a lot of hooks in a lot of different areas, right? What's your experience? We've got similar backgrounds, but what's your experience on successful ways of kicking off that conversation? Is it just a cost play? Is it a value of interaction? Is it a better experience overall? What would you say the benefit of going through the process of starting, which is the hard part, a lot of times, introducing it into an organization, if you will, and investing in it the right way so that you do get a good value out of it?
Yeah, I think the challenging part for large organizations is that you put if you call it knowledge management, everyone's going to have their own point of view. Every part of the organization is going to have their own point of view on it.
What do you mean?
So knowledge management to contact centers, having that QA process and information readily available is different than document storage, document archiving, web content archiving, digital rights management. There's a ton of different ways that people.
Right, it's not the landfill of information, right? It's specifically.
And I remember, in our Best Buy days the CAM project that we tried to start.
Project Gotham?
I think it was Project Gotham. It was Batman themed. Was trying to tackle this.
I'm more of a Marvel comic guy than a DC comic guy.
Yeah, I'm not a big Superman guy. No, Marvel's much better.
Yeah.
At least I grew up with Marvel.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry. Someone waving in there? Oh, Gavin's erasing the whiteboard. Sorry,
he's kind of waving.
We're not in the conference room, so we've got activity in the office.
Was it Monkey? Was Monkey
I
waving?
think Monkey. What does Monkey have on his head?
Oh, he's got a treat. He's got a treat for Scott.
Oh, cool. Cheers.
It's an almond cluster.
Nut cluster. Not exactly.
We're nerds.
Anyway, so back on topic. We're trying to kind of boil the ocean as an enterprise. Like, what do we need from an enterprise to solve Geek Squad's needs and Best Buy needs and marketing needs and IT needs,
Call
and
center,
web needs,
store, and field.
And I think the project spun up to at least $100 million. The estimate was
the first pass was a little less than that, but it had bigger implications down the road. Yeah, for sure.
Which is, if everyone has a different definition and priority of requirements, it's not going to get something done.
Right.
And I think,
well, I think I was reporting to you at the time, and I came downstairs after that meeting and went, "There's no way we're going to get anything right now for holiday for the call center agents. If we wait for, what was it, 5 or 6 high-level Visual Basic programmers to develop out this product, service, marketing database of stuff, right? And then all the search functionality around it was more of a custom code thing. I mean, from our perspective, right? I mean, we had a Sunday insert drop in the Sunday newspaper at the time, right? And we would get call volume based on bad product pricing or a hot commodity item or whatever, and we had to react in the moment, right? Likewise, there was not this, it wasn't a direct integration with all of the marketing and all of the other operational things that were going on in the company at the time, because let's face it, a retail store typically focuses on what happens in the store, right? Or a retail company. So we knew we weren't going to get we didn't have the runway, right?
Yeah. So Utopia, I think Utopia with knowledge as an enterprise is, I don't think you can never get there. So, I think from an effectiveness standpoint, I think what we've seen work better is compartmentalizing what the need is.
Yeah.
In contact centers, it's a lot easier because you have the business metrics to bump against. So you're going to save handle time, you're going to improve customer sat, you're going to improve first call resolution. All of those things are possible with a good knowledge tool and process. So, I wouldn't wait for the enterprise to dictate a solution. So if you're a company that's waiting for the company to come together and create this knowledge utopia, I think you're gonna be waiting a long time. So we highly recommend that you go try something targeted. Don't feel you have to follow an enterprise construct, because I don't think you're ever going to get there. And by the time you get it, it's going to be so watered down that it's not going to be effective anyway. So there are so many good tools out there that are targeted towards contact center specifically. That could, you have a customer-facing knowledge, you've got agent-facing knowledge maintained in the same place. So anyway, get started with something that's specifically tailored to your own contact center processes is highly recommended versus trying to plug into an enterprise construct. And I know it's easier said than done, but there's ways to get it done, and pay for it with, kind of run the business dollars.
Well, and I think where we found a lot of success in that point specifically, right, was, to kind of follow the story along. We went out and we already had a relationship with a company at the time that did our email management. And they were introducing a knowledge module in their system. So, we talked to them about, hey, there's an opportunity here rather than us waiting a year or more for the enterprise to come together, to your point. We need something now. So can we pilot something? Could we test run something with a small group of agents and figure out what we really need from a requirement standpoint, get it implemented, and then see what kind of benefit we get out of it? And which is what we did, right? And we ended up, spending such a small percentage of what the total Project Gotham was going to be, right? It was, a huge amount. I think it was probably 1%. We spent 1% of what Project Gotham was to get that knowledge management module across all of the sites and across all of our agents that needed it. And then at the time, I think because we learned so much about what we needed versus what would be nice to have, that it got us really more specific about, here are the 3 or 4 different experience anchor points, and here are the benefits, right? We save time. We could spend more time with the customer having a dialogue rather than trying to search these crazy ways of finding, what the specs on a 50-inch Samsung LCD TV were, right? Or how to fix it. And so it was much more personal to the experience. And I think that's the way you think about it, right? There is a direct benefit on I can get to the knowledge quicker without having to train all of the ins and outs of what's in the product, like the TV or whatever. So I didn't have to worry about that, but I could worry about more of the dialogue and the relationship that I had with the customer. And then your point about maintaining and kind of allowing that content to grow and morph into what you really needed it for as it was becoming kind of seasonal or cyclical for the products that we serviced, was we released it out to the agents themselves and let them manage it like a wiki.
Yep.
Right? So we let them self-police around it, and that way it became a lot bigger than us. And agents were really active about inputting their review of whether that article was important or not, or those kind of things. So looking for those kind of feedback mechanisms and insight pipeline mechanisms to keep it relevant, keep the database flowing, push those relevant content articles or those trending articles up to the front so that you don't even have to search in some cases based on seasonality or calendar or whatever, were ways that we tuned it as an ongoing process, but we didn't have to get it all baked and boiled right away, right? It was, let's just get some small wins out of it, learn what we really need, and then move forward. And it ended up being a really good process that way. So we could invest in bite-sized pieces rather than say, well, let's go spend X million dollars in getting it in front of 1,000 agents or 2,000 agents. Let's test it and pilot it and figure out what the right way to deploy that model was.
And just as a point of reference, again, if you have questions that you want us to chime in on, you can either leave a message in the YouTube channel that you're probably watching this on, if you're watching it live, or you can tweet us at infinite_green on Twitter.
Can my phone?
And then my phone will hopefully light up with the questions.
And
So
then I'll give you Scott's phone number too, so you can call him directly.
you could do that too. So anyway, getting back to, I was going to ask Gavin about playing drunk volleyball.
Oh, because he scraped his knee.
Yeah, because I was going to have him show his knee.
Oh, no, that'd be good. That's really great.
Anyway, Gavin, who's missing this, he was in the last two.
Yeah.
He was playing volleyball in Denver at a bachelor party,
Yeah.
I believe, and went hard down for came up scarred.
He didn't even get the point either, so
Yeah,
that's too bad.
it was pretty lame. Anyway, so so you bring up a good point with agent-led processes. I think there's places, I think as a company you have to decide, are we the authority that's going to define the content to serve customers? Are we an intermediary, someone who has some knowledge, but really the customers have all the knowledge? Are we a company where the agent might have the best point of view on how to formulate solutions? So good examples of that are, if you're a Symantec or a virus protection company, you might be in a position to be able to author most of the content. So top down, the company knows best. The company knows what viruses are hitting. We have the best point of view, or Symantec has the best point of view to author a ton of content. Or you could be like, trying to think of a company on the other end of that spectrum that would be all customer-led. It could be like more of a retailer approach where the customer might have the best point of view on how to hook something up, or how to create a solution with your products, and you might want them to have more of a community and have them author some of the knowledge content, or somewhere in between.
Kind of like Dell Answers.
Yeah, Dell Answers or Starbucks Ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that when you're starting your knowledge project, and you want to create something for your agents and customers to use. Mm-hmm. Are you in the best position? Do you have the best point of view?
Yeah.
And in the best position to author content, or are the agents or the customers? And if that's the case, you should really just create a construct for the customers to start having a dialogue. It's probably more community-based at that point, and creating a community of knowledge to have people share that knowledge. So, the knowledge construct can take many forms, and I think the most effective companies are deliberate about how they do that. Whether it's Symantec and dictating most of the knowledge, or a retailer who might let the customer create most of the solutions and they're just chiming in.
Room for input.
Right.
best case or best scenarios, ratings and reviews. I think Amazon probably does that really well, right? Without formally saying,
Yep.
Here's my knowledge base of why you should buy this particular product or service versus this particular product or service, right? It's everyone looks at those, or most of the people that are shopping that are scrutinizing what they're buying, right? Look at some level of ratings and reviews and decide whether or not they're valid. But the companies that monitor their social channels, like Best Buy and other like Starbucks and those kind of things, I'm sure are leveraging internal knowledge systems to make sure that they are speaking accurately, but also speaking or chatting or texting or whatever, right? I'm sure that it doesn't matter the medium. It just matters that there is a source of deeper information if the conversation needs to go there, right?
Yeah.
So having some kind of a social connection. Scott, you sound like you've done that before. Have you done that before?
I might have started a little social community at Best Buy about 7 years ago.
But I mean, you didn't realize the level of detail and information and rich content you were going to get from the customers when you first started, right?
Yeah, we started, I think, the first month we had 300 posts. Maybe started in August or September. Before September, before holiday. We had 300 posts the first month and maybe 800 users. And over holiday, I think we had over 30,000 posts and 10,000 users or something.
Yeah, do you remember how much of that was product related, or call it deep content qualifying related, that would have necessitated a knowledge base?
Yeah, I would guesstimate that 70% of it was customer to customer product related questions. Can this Samsung TV do this? Yeah. Can this receiver do that? I want to integrate it to this XYZ thing. Can it do that?
Right. So did we train the call center agents on all of the subtle nuances between brand A, brand B, brand C? No.
It was meant to be a facilitated conversation or a moderated conversation to get it focused, but it was really meant to be a customer to customer content creation. I think when I left a year later, there were probably 250,000 articles of customer created content in the community. And again, I think that's being able to search that. So if you're an agent on the phone in some other call center, you're not doing the social moderation, being able to find a solution that works for you and being able to search that kind of content.
The way
it's not all the content. In other words, customers can't search on a Best Buy SOP as an example, right? You still need access to training documentation, procedural documentation, customer talking points, what a good call sounds like, all of those things. But the core knowledge of maybe if the customer contacted you and asked a specific product question, or can it do, that community probably had the better answer than anything we can construct ourselves.
Well, and it gets back to that. Why do you look at ratings or reviews before you buy maybe a big ticket item, right? As you get a broader point of view without going and having to physically ask 15 or 30 or 300 people, right, whether they like it or not. So I think to me, that's where the blending of the social and of the base kind of comes together. I think Salesforce knowledge is similar to that. I think there's some Oracle products out there, maybe some more progressive Oracle products that, that offer that same level of connectivity to the social or to the crowd, if you will, versus just how well you maintain or have that knowledge stored. So maybe that's it sounds like, and it feels like it's really hard to maintain something like this. Or, if you have 250,000 articles like you were talking about, I mean, how do you go through it and make sure that they're all valid, or some of them are valid, or how do you maintain the value proposition of that being, a customer facing as well as an agent facing, an internal facing kind of mechanism? Because that can get out of hand pretty quickly. Right, especially with a big retailer, right, that has to service hundreds of thousands of products right? How do you maintain? So maybe the maintenance side of it. What do you think on that?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one because I think you've got your internal kind of knowledge processes, operational procedures, and those things you need to maintain. You need to keep that fresh. You need to maintain it as a team. You need to have people deliberately doing that. When it comes to customer-facing communities and knowledge sources that are external, or internal and external, I think segmenting those when you do a search. I know we're working on a current project where we want to return not only knowledge that we've created as a company, but knowledge that exists in communities and maybe knowledge that exists externally. You can't maintain those two, right? It's really tough to maintain a customer-facing community or maintain it from a content perspective.
Oh, from a content, okay.
You can filter it and index it and make it more searchable and more usable. But I think the internal knowledge management, you just have to keep a good handle on a good rating system. Right. So rating system, I think, helps quite a bit. I think that was the next thing I wanted to get to is how do you measure effectiveness?
Well, it's like search engine optimization too, right? So going back to your Google, point, right? The search functionality in Google is so general to the common search, and yet on the back end, it's just not bringing forward articles that are not relevant to that topic, right, or to that intent. And doesn't mean that those articles will go away or that they should be managed.
Right.
It's just that the relevancy is probably date and time is somewhere. Data is probably somewhere in there, right? Amount of times that article has been searched or that search string has been input. Yeah. But so you don't necessarily have to, or you should look for something that you don't have to maintain or that you're comfortable with not maintaining at a certain point because you can't maintain it all, right? Right.
But I think the rating system, going back to that rating system, having an active rating system on your internal content, I think is critical.
Yeah.
It's the only way you're going to know if it's usable, if it's being used, what's being searched for. And I wouldn't be one of the things that I've learned over time is I wouldn't be afraid if something's not relevant or if something's not being used or identified in a search, archive it or get rid of it. I think most companies are very afraid to let go of some of the content that's old. And I think my point of view is if it's important and people are searching for it and not finding it, you'll get that in reports and probably create a better article anyway.
Yeah.
So being able to let that old stuff go that's not being searched for, and if something becomes more relevant all of a sudden, it probably doesn't take that much time to create an additional knowledge piece.
So you wouldn't advocate going through 100,000 or 1 million knowledge article database that says any system that's on Windows 95.
Right. Although somebody might still have Windows 95.
Come on.
The chances are that they still have 95 and will still find it relevant is slim to none.
Pretty none. Yeah.
Right. So,
but stuff like that, right? So you don't necessarily have to go through the exercise of deleting all of that, right? Because content is content, right? And you can either update it and say, no, this isn't for 95 anymore. So you could leverage what's in that content for the most part, but just update it.
Yeah.
You don't have to create it from new is I guess my point, but you also don't have to be diligent about deleting stuff out, right?
Yeah. And you could look at it a couple of different ways. One way is to say, if something hasn't been searched for and used in a year, and you have 100,000 articles,
don't even bring it back in the search.
Archive it, and if you want to reference it later, fantastic. But archive it and get it out of the search results. I'd much rather have somebody find nothing, my personal opinion, and have to create content like, hey, there's 10 people searching for this all of a sudden, and we don't have a piece of content for it, so. That rapid creation of looking at your search performance, and not finding content around it. Like, let's say a good example is Windows 10, right? Windows 10 is a new operating system. If you're a company that has ties to Windows 10, there could be some old, but probably not. So there's probably content that you need to create.
Right.
And I'd say it's probably more relevant in the moment. It's probably going to be better content than to write something in the moment now while it's relevant than it is to try to match it to something that's 8 years old.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I know Windows 10 is not 8 years old, but the point still stands. If there's not if there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of articles that people aren't looking at, searching for, finding relevant, archive it and let people find the relevant stuff. And if it's not findable, create something real quick in the moment.
Yeah. So to that point, like, how do you set those standards up? I mean, I wasn't really actively involved in how the details and the process got delivered as much as I knew we needed the functionality of it. So, I went and kind of gained investment and gained kind of consensus within the leadership that we should do it. But what kind of team construct should you have? Do you just is it the Wild Wild West, right? Do you let everybody kind of do what they need to do? Is there somebody that is a super user that kind of maintains law and order, or do you have a team that's dedicated to some of this? Because it really is, and the reason why I'm asking is it's an asset that's greater than the value of just the words on a page, right? So it is something that, if managed and supported and used the right way, whether it's actively managed or passively managed or community managed, it's an asset that's deeper than just the that one particular article, right? It's a confidence in the system. It's the ability to have that greater relationship with the customer, or that greater dialogue with the customer to create a better relationship. And I think that's the piece so how do you set up a team that maintains that, or a person, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think most companies that we've interacted with probably have it attached to the L&D team. Right. So part of your quality process training cycle. So that's the place with the most content.
They're training all the time, right? Or
they're training, so they're actively sharing knowledge and teaching people how to find knowledge and serve customers. I think part of it should also be we want to make sure that it's attached to the reporting team. Mm-hmm. So the L&D team typically is set up to do analytics very well. They're trainers, they're process developers. They're not analytics experts, and so I think you need to have it attached to the reporting team as well, or any kind of analytics team, to show you how well things are working. Are you taking a picture of me in a picture? Mm-hmm. How well things are, or how effective the search is. And I don't think an L&D team is set up to do that very, very well. The skills, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but just naturally.
Traditional L&D.
Yeah, and make sure it's attached to the analyst side, and make sure you have somebody focused on how a customer is using it too. So the agents and the customers, I think, use it in different ways. Mm-hmm. Although they share some of the content, like how do I and how does this work, and from a product and service perspective, it's shared. Oftentimes, you need additional information for your agents to serve customers effectively, and customers will search for it in more of their language and their terms. So you need to have somebody tuning it, one for the customer-facing elements and one for the agent experience, and that side of it. So it's I think it's a multifaceted type, but I think the function of it, the general day-to-day maintenance, usually is more L&D or SOP kind of related, that quality process and training cycle. So speaking of measurements and measuring effectiveness, I know we talked about trending thumbs up, thumbs down, but what are the it's a kind of it's a broad question, right? How do you measure the effectiveness of a good KM tool? And I think my personal perspective, I think if you asked me that 20 years ago, I would have looked for a metric. I would have looked for that, how effective, give me a percentage, give me a number, give me a time. Yeah. And now, kind of looking back over the years and how we've gone into companies and assessed it, I'd say the first thing you do is ask the agents, how is it working? Do you find stuff you need? Yep. Let me see how you use it. Give me some feedback on how the tool is working and what's missing. Yeah. I think companies oftentimes fail to do that. I know agent experience around a tool like this, it is their not their crutch. What's the term?
Well, their confidence, right? Confidence in the overall system. It's not whether they have to use it every time.
Yep.
is that they know it's there and it's relevant to the dialogue that they need to have or to get to done with their experience. Not necessarily faster, but with less pain.
Yep. And I think trust and confidence that the customer, this is where it ties to agent experience equals customer experience, right? If the agent can find content that's relevant, it's written in a way that they can explain it to a customer, the customer understands it, they trust it, they trust the answer that the agent's giving them because the agent has confidence in it.
Yeah.
An agent experience equals the customer experience. I think that's a philosophy that, the last 6 years of Infinite Green that we try to share with our customers. It's not good enough just to measure the customer experience. The agent's ability to get information and to talk to a customer about it in relevant ways is probably the single biggest driver of customer satisfaction, wouldn't you say?
But yeah, I would. But you brought up something before, right? It's that the one thing I think that is missing maybe out of the process that still is to be kind of leveraged or valued in whether I have a really, something that's as basic as maybe a SharePoint type of an environment all the way to, an enterprise level tool that's heavily managed or heavily process supported and those kind of things is, some kind of a mechanism. And we've talked about this for years about, the ratings and reviews, the thumbs up, thumbs down on how well that article helped. That's a good starting point. But if you think about the world of CRM and being able to log or measure things during that interaction with the customer, if it's in the knowledge base, great, right? You can rate it and review it. But the sin of omission there, if you don't have that, if the customer asks for something or intimates something that is not in your database, how do you get that idea? So it could be a lot of product opportunities or service opportunities while you're searching, right? On a call, that if, as a consumer, right, if I call in a number, I know if I give something, I'll get something, right? If I give some of my information that helps them hone in on what my account is, I know I should expect to get something back. And the reason why I'm calling isn't because I'm bored and lonely. It's because I need something typically, right? So there's this quid pro quo or, action reaction type of a thing. But in the course of that interaction, I might talk about 3 or 4 more things on the I wish I could or I wish I had that a lot of times, and most of the knowledge systems don't incorporate enough of a free form area, or is it right to do all of your opportunity, information logging in a knowledge-based system? So my
Those
point
contextual elements.
Yeah, my point is that why go to your CRM and case notes and all that kind of stuff when you could just cut the middleman out and go right to your knowledge base? And then if you've got a really good process of how it's goes out and searches internal articles, external information, all that kind of stuff, you may be able to add content on a regular basis based on things that customers are asking for that you don't have in there. So I would like to see that part of the product suite kind of evolve a little bit more.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I mean, this gets back to, this is a little bit of a deviation, but case notes versus KM tracking and knowledge tracking is an interesting concept because usually when we go into a company,
right, you wouldn't put in what you search for and how you search for it. You would put in, well, I was looking for product information.
Yeah, you get some kind of note in a CRM system that said, customer called on product A. Customer called looking for product is probably what an agent would notate, right? Which doesn't give you any insight other than the customer called. Customer, it would probably be lumped into some kind of category about customer called about product or product inquiry is probably what it would come back with. So we had 15,968 product inquiry calls last month. When if you did a knowledge report or ability to track that contextually in a search, you'd probably get a list of 100 different product names.
Right, or of the 15,000 that were searched, generally speaking, 4,000 of those, and I'm making it up, right, are products that we didn't even offer.
Right.
But if it was relevant enough for us to add that into the system, I could go back to the merchant team or the buying team and say, hey, did you know we were getting X number of calls on this because we had to search because we didn't know that they were there in our typical product, database or our .com site. And that was, an opportunity for us to grow the business, right? So there's like this opportunity value add kind of component within the process that I just don't think the product suites have gone far enough in that. And I don't think they've integrated enough into the social space yet to make that all kind of one cohesive unit. Like if I was on a design team, I'd love to be able to sit down and have a bunch of customers, a bunch of call center agents, have a deep catalog of, stuff, whatever it is that we're trying to service, and go, okay, how would that all work if you scenario A, if you needed a basic, XYZ information, or if they didn't offer something, and what are the value, components around that, and build that through the system, because that's what an agent needs when they're talking to these customers that don't. Call center agents typically are like one of your most resourceful type of employees, right? They typically have the less than adequate systems to use. They typically are taking call after call after call, or chat after chat. And so they're in a regular mode, and they're going to always take the path of least resistance. So finding
more effective,
the
path of effective.
Path of effectiveness is probably a better way of saying it, right? But it's kind of a moral dilemma for them if they can't find the answer, because they just want to help people, right? Typically. Yeah. And if they can't find the answer because it's something that is not in the base, or not in, what they have, or somebody got to them in the wrong way, but they just wanted to see that through to result, there's really not a way to do that unless you log it into a case somewhere in a CRM system that you never get feedback on anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to move upstream into search analytics. This gets back into analytics versus case type tracking, case type hierarchies, right? So if you're not tracking search today, I highly recommend people have someone do a search analytics study on, it doesn't matter if it's on top of KM or however your agents are finding information, and searching for information, being able to do search analytics to say, how was the customer asking for it? How was the agent asking for it?
Yeah.
What's being retrieved? And I've seen so many times that people just do here's the knowledge articles that were opened.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't give you a good idea if they found the information. It just gives you that those knowledge articles came back and might have the word form in it 800 times, and that's why it's being used so much.
Right.
The search string is actually the most important thing. I think that's what Google's figured out.
Yeah.
Is not necessarily the structure of the CAM, because they don't have an ability to structure the knowledge across the internet. All they can do is really focus on search and what's coming back and how is that relevant to consumers, and they've taken it so far upstream. You look at how Google has adapted the Android platform to send you those cards, right? It has so much context on your behavior. It's just teeing you up with content it thinks is relevant because of the power of the community, right? Hey, a million other people found this relevant when they did this, and this. So I'm going to tee that up to you automatically. It'd be interesting to see if companies could go that far and look for the search that you did and start just pushing content, relevant content, and cards and different pieces of chunks of information, whether it's from the loyalty system, the CRM system, the knowledge system, the transactional system, and serve customers the same way Android is serving you as a user from customer service.
It learns from you, right?
That would be really kind of the ultimate state. Like exactly, and obviously you'd say that the customer could push that from your company ahead of time, and they wouldn't need to call. I think that's the ultimate state. But in lieu of that, bridging that, if you didn't have that much relevancy, testing that relevancy with the agent, pushing them content up as the customer's talking. So speech to text analytics in real time would be a pretty interesting concept to test, because the capability is there. Speech to text capability is there. Text analytics is there. Search functionality is there.
Yeah.
Now you need some relevant bridging in between those kinds of things. But I'd love to test. As the customer is talking, things are getting searched for and filtered down in the background.
Right.
Which I think is coming. I think people are testing and playing with it, but that's what I think.
With Siri and with with your OK Google functionality within your phones, right? You're doing that, right? So if you think about it, what you just said, that didn't happen by someone being super smart and getting 100% accuracy right away.
Right.
It has to learn. It has to be able to rate kind of whether or not you clicked through or whether it understood what you were searching for and what you clicked through, so it could learn your language, right? And I think that's the piece that, if I helicopter all of this stuff up to kind of one comment or one kind of point, John's editorial, right, is search process can be as simple or as hard as you make it. But if you take out all the guesswork and think more in terms of like a Google search or a very broad search based on intent or based on how you think of things, and you can allow your system to either understand some basics around that so that you can get really close, call it 80% close to the pin, or it can learn, right? And over time it'll learn better and it'll provide you better service and ultimately may automate it, right? Or not. I think that would be the end state experience for an agent or for a customer that should be that should start here, and that should inform the rest of how you set up your, we talked about organization structure and how to write an article and all of that management stuff, right? Understanding kind of how simple or how structured you want to have that process of searching, to me is, it's like the front page of Google. When you go in and put your typical search in, everything else happens after that. So you probably, if you've gone through a deep and wide search on Google, you might not be able to get back up to some of those articles because it's taken you all the way down, and contextually wouldn't get you back up, right? But I think that end experience and that end kind of designation of how structured or how open do you want it to be will define and should define how much you need to manage it or how much you need the community to be able to learn or manage from that, as you go.
Yeah, but it really comes down to, a lot of companies would say, well, we need relevant content first. And that's not where Google started.
Right.
They said, we need a really good search first. Right. And then we'll start feeding it relevant connection points. And I think a lot of companies probably focus on the content first. Like I can't, and that's probably in my opinion, it's probably a never winning. You can't win that game because the products and things and your services and SOP evolve so rapidly in this market in these times that focusing on making sure you have relevant content is probably not the end game. Focusing on having a great search engine, and you have to have some structure. Don't get me wrong, you have to have some content, but moving upstream and focusing on search and search analytics and making sure that you're providing the relevant connection points to the customer and to the agent on the phone, to the content that's there is probably the most critical aspect.
Well, it's why Uber's really successful, right? They don't own the cars, they don't own the taxis. They just own a really good way of connecting and making sure that you get value and service, right? And Airbnb is kind of the same way, or Facebook.
They don't own any of the content.
Right? They don't own that content. They just make sure that it's really easy to get what's relevant to you, as simply as possible and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the customer creates the content. They've created a good way to organize and search it.
Right.
That's meaningful.
So it's pretty easy.
Yeah,
it's all easy.
Boil the ocean.
I think we just did, didn't we?
We tried. What else? We got 5 minutes. We could talk about transitioning data from one platform to the other, or we could just.
I think we're done. Yeah, stick a fork in it. No,
it's Friday.
I just think.
I mean,
I don't think to boil this thing all. If you want to get started, how would you get started, right? Well, you have to have focus on whether it's relevant for your service needs or not. And if you just want to test and try something, there's a lot of tools out there that can help you figure out what requirements you need if you want to go to a bigger investment later. So that's what we help companies do. We help get them over the hurdle, or help the rest of the company understand why it's important to test and try environments out.
Yeah,
you don't have to build it out so that it's completely.
Do not approach it with a big bang.
Right.
We will build the Taj Mahal because you know what? In a year, it's not going to be relevant
No.
anymore, and it's going to be way too difficult to maintain. So
And it should be bigger than you, right? It should be bigger than one person. And if you do it the right way, you leave it open-ended enough so that it can self-steer, like what Wiki did, or it self-polices, but it's certainly something that's relevant to your brand, and it actually can be a very marketable asset. Like I said before, it's not just the time and energy it takes to get a document or a piece of content into the knowledge base. It's the amount of service and use you get out of it, so that you can have a better relationship with the customer when you're servicing them, or the customer can get self-service when they want it.
it's way more important to have a process of continual engineering and continual updating and communication than it is to spend 10 people's resources in a year to build to build all of this structure only to not know if it works or not. And then to try to course correct something that's built that complex is very difficult and expensive. So highly adaptable knowledge and systems are closest to the customer, closest to the agent, closest to the solution, and measured and monitored and updated in a constant flow.
And confident.
Yep.
You're confident in that.
And not the Taj Mahal anymore. And that's
Right.
I think that's probably the biggest pitfall I would say companies fall into, is they try to solve for everything.
Yeah.
And you just never get there.
Right.
You spend a lot of money and heartache trying to do it.
Yeah.
When a year after the fact, we get treats.
We get treats.
Sweet.
Thanks,
Jeremy. This is what you get for being a good boy for an hour.
For talking.
So anyway, thanks for listening.
Until next month.
If you have an idea or a topic that you want us to talk about, please email us, tweet us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can go to goinfinitegreen.com. LinkedIn. Where else are we? Don't have Instagram yet.
No.
Anyway.
Maybe we will.
But give us an idea. And again, last Friday of every calendar month at noon Central Time, we have Green Talk. This is number 3. We're going to talk about anything kind of customer experience related, ops related. I think we just don't want to talk about sports. That's the one thing I don't want to talk about is sports. But
exactly.
Unless the Twins are winning, then we'll talk about it.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Joe, thanks for listening.
Good chat, Russ.